Welcome back. It's 7:39. You join us in Sofaland and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Dawn. Now let's take a look at some of the newspapers' front pages this morning.
The Iron newspaper leads with New Year rail chaos as train bosses warn of severe weekend disruption.
And The Guardian reports on that courts and the NHS won't recover until the 2030s, according to a report.
Meanwhile, The Telegraph reports on the UK ramping up its Ukraine arms support after the biggest attack on Kiev since the war began.
And The Times leads on job centres and bosses referring people to therapy and running to keep them well enough in an effort to combat long-term sickness.
Meanwhile, The Mirror says it's an honours farce again, with charity heroes Kevin Sinfield and Rob Burrow missing out on knighthoods yet again.
OK, now join us to go through some of the day's headlines is author and broadcaster Nikki Hodgson and also former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us,
Welcome
Charlie.
to Sofa World.
Yeah,
I like that. Sofa World.
So we're here now. We've settled in, haven't we?
Don't get too comfortable. These two might nod off. Anyway, Charlie.
Not that you're boring or anything, Martin, but...
Charlie, let's get serious again. You got sort of the Daily Mail. True democracy, and it's our friend Boris Johnson.
It is, and I couldn't help but not pick this story because he's given a great Christmas message, I know, to your viewers, and is joining in January. But he's got his a column in the Mail this weekend, and effectively what he's saying, and I think it's well worth a read. If there's any essay to read this weekend, it is probably this one, because what he's talking about is the threat of democracy, particularly. I know we talked about Ukraine and Russia at the first hour, but the idea that in the Western world, when you have democracies that are being blighted by just the court system, and in particular we've seen the example in Maine, the state of Maine, trying to block Donald Trump from being on the ticket as a US presidential candidate. When you are a Western world and a Western democracy and you flourish as a society, you've got the best universities, you've got the best democracy, you've got the best way of life. The idea that you have these blockages in Western society, that plays into the hands of our opponents. It plays into the hands of Russia. It plays into the hands of, as I say, any other autocracy who wants to cause harm to the West. And it's just a brilliant piece to articulate, actually, here in the UK, going into 2024, when we'll have our own general election, when we've got the US election, that we as a Western world, democracy must be in the hands of the people, the will of the people to elect who they want.
Yep.
And that goes for Ukraine as well, because Ukraine can elect who it wants versus a Russia who it pretty much doesn't. The West must win.
Yes, that sounds great on paper, but Nikki, we're all nodding along because we know that with Brexit, we saw democracy was trammelled, was prevented by the Lords, by a split parliament. And in America, an absurd situation where Democrat-driven states are effectively trying to stop Trump from even standing. I think now people are seeing this for what it is. They're seeing it as politically motivated. I think people just want to take back control. Both sides of the Atlantic, they want their voice to matter, and they feel oftentimes politicians are working against the democratic process.
I mean, I think Brexit and lockdown in particular have really, really damaged our trust in democracy in the West. And I think the election next year will be so interesting just to see what voter turnout is.
Yeah.
Do people think they can actually affect change themselves? I bet they don't think that anymore. I bet a lot of people, I imagine it'll be very, very low voter turnout next year.
Well, I think because most people don't know who to vote for, and if you go on the I know by-elections are different, they're incredibly low turnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, 30% in most of those.
Yeah. Even where technically you can, change who will be voting in on the next election, dependent on some by-election tickets.
But as we were saying in the first hour, youngsters, if there's an election in December, will probably not go out and vote because the weather will be a bit rubbish. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
Get out and vote, it's important.
Well, snowflakes can survive in winter, can't they? I mean, that's the weather for the future.
On a serious point, I think the none of the above party carries a lot of attraction because people feel so disillusioned.
Yeah.
They do feel that if they voted Conservative, they haven't been actually that Conservative. If they voted for Brexit, they tried to stop it. In America, if you want to vote for Trump, you're not allowed to. In Colorado and Maine, and who knows who else will follow. So there is this sense that politics is becoming the anti of democracy. It's becoming a closed shop.
I think that's absolutely right. And, there will be people that then move to other parties, but then in the UK, that will be incredibly fascinating to see because we've had a two-party system for such a long time.
Yes.
you know, it seems to me that the only two people that will be Prime Minister will either be Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, but moving to other parties...
Well, Reform are going to take so many votes away from the Conservative Party.
And it's a job and the task of the Tory Party to say, look, if you vote for another party, you could risk Sir Keir Starmer coming through the back door, who could undo all of the work that you were saying, Martin, about Brexit and all the rest of it, particularly in those northern red wall seats.
As we're on the topic, and I'm just obsessed by politics and trying to change things in Britain, is the first-past-the-post system just so incumbently obstructive to any political change? We don't have proportional representation. We probably never will get it because the party in power wants to make sure they stay in power, or they're only ever challenged by the blue or the reds. And so, therefore, are people waking up to this now? They're just going to stay at home.
Well, I think you've got to be careful, you know, sometimes what you wish for, because, you know, we had a coalition government in 2010.
Remember that?
And the public couldn't stand that. And that was you know, the attempt of sort of having a cross-party rainbow system, and it was only two parties involved. But back then, you know, it obviously got rejected fundamentally by the public.
It did.
So having even more...
It gave us Nick Clegg. Be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for out there. Go and vote, please. Just go and vote, please. Talking of the Tory Party, let's move on to the Express, Nikki, and our very own Esther McVeigh. What's she saying?
Yes, well, our common sense are. She's actually... me and Esther don't agree very often, but actually on this we really do. She's calling for more breaking down of the barriers in the awarding of New Year's honours, because what she's saying is, you know, too many of the obvious people get honours, and you know, they start with an OBE and then eventually they get, you know, a damehood or a knighthood or whatever, and it just seems kind of like it's inevitable that that will happen. And that what we really need to do is actually ask local people and you know, people working in charities, and you know, we've got to get much better at the way we select who is awarded something for service to community, because it does often seem like it's, you kind of just, maybe you know somebody, you were in the right moment at the right time with somebody in a room, you know, and therefore you were seen, etc. So I actually really, really support what she's saying.
But this is the interesting thing with the awards, isn't it? It's the celebrities and the sports stars that get the headlines, but it's the important awards are the ones that, like the little lad that I mentioned earlier on, that, you know, is 9 years old, and for raising money for charity, like millions is raised by himself. And these are the ones that are important, but we don't spend enough time talking about them. We're talking about, you know, the likes of Michael Eavis, you know, Glastonbury boss, you know, and it's like... But it's not sexy to talk about the charity workers, is it?
No, and I mean, I do think we have some terrific awards ceremonies that kind of make up for that a bit in Britain. You know, like Children of Britain Award, is it?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That really does honour, you know, some very, very brave young people. But, yeah, it's a shame that it's always focused on the celebrity. And, that, of course, papers are going to put the pictures of the celebrities that have won the awards and not the other people. I have to say, though, Dame Julie Cooper is... I'm just so happy that she's got a damehood. Because, as Martin knows, I used to be in the business of writing bonkbusters myself, so this gives me hope that maybe one day I'll get there.
There's a word.
Dame Nikki.
Yeah.
Dame Nikki, that's got a ring to it.
Something we haven't mentioned yet, I'd like to squeak in if we can. Arise, Sir Brexit. Sir Tim Martin, not Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, a lot of people thought should have got a gong. That never happened. Tim Martin has. A lot of people aren't happy about it because, of course, they can't forgive him, Charlie, for the fact he was a Brexiteer. Surely this fella deserves his gong.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, look, you know, whether it's down to Brexit, I mean, he's a very successful businessman.
It's the business, isn't it? He's been awarded a gong
and that should
for,
be awarded. And it goes back to, I mean, he's somewhere sort of in the middle. You know, he's become a celebrity, I think, because of some of his views and the way in which he's sort of been a vocal campaigner, particularly on Brexit. But there'll be other issues too, particularly around the cost of living, I'm sure. But it goes back to that sort of, yes, you can be a celebrity and do a one-off or host a one-off event and, you know, you get praise because it's in the national interest. But it's those people that are running either a business day-to-day or people that are in the charity sector. The small you know, the lollipop ladies who have committed years and years of service, you know, who should be really championed and are the real...
the thing that annoys me with the celebrities getting their gongs is their agents and their people that lobby for the gong, put their names forward and lobby. And as you say, your average lollipop lady who's put in years of service, no one lobbies for her.
No,
exactly.
So they deserve them.
The process is not very open, is it, either? It's not that you can... I think there's, like, the odd thing you can recommend someone for, but we don't know. I don't know how the system really works, actually, and I should as a journalist, you know?
I'm detecting a little tinge of bitterness that you haven't been put forward.
Well, you could always nominate you next year. I mean, Dame Dawn...
Dame Dawn. I like Dame Dawn.
Dame Dawn. Yeah, absolutely.
And Arise, Sir Martin. I mean, that's, you know...
It's a bit early for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, let's move on quickly.
You went there.
Well, somebody had to. Let's move on quickly.
Soon, Martin.
Charlie, Well, that's, yeah, again, it's a bit
Stop.
of that.
Stop, right, stop.
It's getting a bit carry on who made it.
Exactly.
Let's
It's
move on.
not even the 9 a.m. watershed, let alone the 9 p.m. watershed.
Long-term, you're making an old man blush. Long-term sickness, Charlie, something I complain about a lot, because I think since COVID we've become sick now in Britain.
That's absolutely right, and I think we must all stand to attention at this story because
There we go.
It's one that I think will be a bugbear to many people across this country, where we've got now 2.6 million people out of work on off-sick benefits. And so trying to create a system whereby you can help these people do things that they focus on what people can do rather than what they can't do.
Yeah.
And so there's an occupational health service now being set up. It's being launched by the Work and Pension Secretary in joint hand in glove with the Health Secretary to make sure that people are actually doing things that they can do, so referring people to running, people to go into garden centres, active things that they can manage in order to help their own personal health, not relying just on doctors on the NHS day after day, sort of going through consultations and just pills and all the rest of it.
A lot of people, Nicky, will think this is a bit too fluffy, a bit too touchy-feely, but do you think it has merit?
Of course it does. I mean, I've had mental health issues and been very, very open about them. And the one thing that absolutely works for me is, as well as medication, is exercise. Exercise cures so many problems in our lives. It's so important to move. And it doesn't have to be, you know, going to the gym 10 times a week or whatever, you know, just moving your body is what we are designed to do it. We are designed to do it.
Yeah.
It lifts our mood. All the chemicals in our brain, respond to it positively. The one thing that I don't like about this is that there isn't necessarily going to be diagnoses of people, you know, so especially when it comes to mental health, so many people are not diagnosed with a condition that could be really easily treated with exercise and medication. I worked for the NHS in the mental health service once, and the first thing that the doctors would recommend is that you exercise and then you took the medication they gave you, and that was pretty much it. And it's actually much more simple to sort a lot of people's mental health out than we think it is. But if you don't give a diagnosis or you don't see people to start off with, because people will have a pattern of behaviour over a lifetime that will give a doctor a lot of indications as to what's actually going on. But we have to get people seen, and obviously we know mental health services are so oversubscribed, and that is a huge problem. So I support, you know, the idea, but we've got to get that diagnosis stuff going on.
Yeah, and we also have to get people taking responsibility for their own behaviour, because you can give them advice, you can tell them this is going to be really good for you, but then they have to go and do it themselves. Yeah,
that's a neat segue into the next story. Nicky, we talked about this earlier. French dry January. Booze ban. This is doctors encouraging a month off. So it's a bit like the previous story. Doctors saying, what's happening?
Well, it's quite provocative for France, though, isn't it? Because they're the second largest consumers of wine after the US. Think about the scale of
the size, the size.
You know, just to understand that. And we know that the French famously drink at lunchtime, even when they work, and in the evening. I mean, Emmanuel Macron is seen as the most pro-booze president since the 50s. And he says that a meal without wine is a bit sad. I mean, I feel the same.
Exactly that. You know,
one of the few good things he's ever said.
Breakfast can be really depressing with that glass of wine.
But joke. But to be fair, the doctors have actually come together and said, we know that the alcohol industry is very strong in France, but it's a really good idea for the French people to do dry January if they can. We're not talking about feather, we're not talking about, you know, giving up for life, but just have a break.
Everything in moderation, right? Does that make sense? OK.
Yep.
So, but the problem with sort of like Sober October and Dry January, I mean, most of the people I know are journalists, to be fair, but as soon as that month finishes, everyone's face down in the gutter again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
don't do that this time.
No, I don't do dry. January for me is one of the best times of year to drink, because the pubs are empty. All the part-timers at Christmas are
and all the booze is on the half price, because everyone's apparently drinking it.
Yeah, all the losers to... Anyway,
we're not going to France in January, then, quite clearly.
But it is surprising that the French are saying this, because, of course, they offer, particularly, they're very protective of their own wine industry, champagne, cognac. So there you go, very surprising. Charlie, California rough surf. This sounds good.
Yes, yes.
Or is it not?
Well, no, it's not.
Depends if you're a sea lion or not.
Is there a clip to look at?
There should be. Hopefully there is a clip. But this is... We were talking about the weather earlier on, and obviously what the chaos with the trains and travel situation in the UK. In California, there was what was described as a rough wave, rough surf, where it sort of attacked the coastline. Here it is. Here it is. And look at that. Here it comes.
Yeah, that's quite exciting. It's not
Depends on where you're standing, I suppose.
It's not a full-blown tsunami.
It's a wave.
But this was totally unexpected, and it's obviously taken that vehicle away somewhere. Hopefully that can be recovered. But those people that have also been washed away downstream, injured about 8 people, I think, are in critical condition in hospital. So it's quite a...
Don't they have big waves? In any case, thank you very much. We've got to move on. We're still talking about the weather, though.
Yeah, we are.
We are, yeah. Because here is Alex Deacon with your weather.
Thank you,
Waves
Charlie.
included.
Thank you, Nikki. Cheers.